Thank you. Okay, so just going back to what I what I just started to explain before. You can use this rule viewer to get this kind of information and act accordingly, remove this risk from your network. One more use case that I wanted to talk with you about is that if I'm going back to the main dashboard that we have, and I know we covered the area that talks more about cleanup. Iowa can remove unused rules, for example, from the network. What we can do in addition to that is that we help organizations with their continuous compliance journey. As you can see here, we present all the rules that you have with critical violations. We also have two different graphs here that talks about how many critical, high, medium, and low violations you have in your network. But maybe you're asking yourself, how does Tufin define what a violation actually is? And it can be a great question. So that's where our unified security policy feature that we have in Tufin comes into play. We call it USP. So USP, think about it as your single source of truth, defining in plain business terms what good poster looks like. We call it the security guardrails. When you work with your USP, you can build USP based on industry standards, for example, according to NERC, ISO, PCI, NIST, or you can import any others, or you can build it based on your own best practices. You also have options to use it based on our own best practices. Each one of these USPs, each one of this unified security policy is going to be defined based on your network segments. It can be your DMZ, your internet, your internal, your external. Each one of them are going to be used in order to build this kind of unified security policy. We can integrate with your IPAM. If you're working with Infoblox, BlueCat, Efficient API, any of them, we can integrate with them in order to import your different network segments, and based on that to build this kind of unified security policy. This network segments, they are not exactly the same zones that you have in your Palo Alto firewalls, for example. They talk about your entire network. So just to show you an example, if I'm taking one of my USPs that I created before, let's take this NERC compliance. This one shows me the entire guardrails of my network. What should be allowed and what should be blocked between any of these network segments. For example, you see here that in my environment, all traffic between the internet to corporate, everything should be blocked. You can see that all traffic between DMZ to DMZ, everything should be allowed. But you can see that from the internet to DMZ, what we're saying that only traffic for HTTPS, SSH, and web browsing as application ID should be allowed. And I also added some more properties. I added that all the rules, they must have explicit source, destination, they must have comment, they must be logged, and they must have hits in the last 3 months. I must mention that this represents the security intent, not the device syntax. Tufin continuously validates all the rules across your on-prem, your cloud, your SASE against this defined intent, against this desired security policy. And let's say that if a firewall allows, let's say according to your best practices, that there should be no SSH from internet to an internal server, Tufin is going to flag it immediately as an alert, as a violation in your network, and will let you know that there is access that is not according to your desired security policy. So this unified security policy that you're seeing in front of you can help with both with two things. First, with proactive risk analysis. It means that when someone submits a request, if it's from your ITSM, if it's from your Tufin directly, this request is going to be compared according to this unified security policy. And if we see that there is a gap between what the user asked for to what's presented in this USP, we're going to let the team know that this request can introduce violation to a network, so they can reject it before even getting it as part of your policies. So that's what we call it proactive risk validation. We prevent new changes from breaking the unified security policy. And of course, I'm going to show you how it looks once we get to the secure change part of this demo. The second thing that we have here is actually talks about reactive risk assessment. And in order to show you that, I'm going to get back to our main dashboard. I told you this is the central of our product. Everything goes back to this main dashboard, and this main dashboard updates every time any of my devices got a new, like send a new revision to Tufin, like something has changed in your Palo Alto devices, we'll know about it immediately, and we're going to reflect it in this dashboard that we have. I'm going back to this dashboard because I want to talk with you about how Tufin can help you with this reactive risk assessment. Once you have your unified security policy configured, you can track across the last 2 years, for example, what has changed in terms of the critical, high, medium, and low violations you had. And we can also see it based on each one of the devices. I can see how many violations I have in each one of the devices I'm monitoring, in each one of my Palo Alto device groups, in my Prisma Access, in my mobile users, remote networks, and etc. I can also see how many violations related to each one of the unified security policies I'm working with. For example, I have many violations to my PCI regulation I'm working with, many violations for NIST. Most of the violations I have related to my corporate matrix. This is what for example, what your organization can define what should be allowed and what should be blocked between each one of your network segments. And according to that, you can see what's not aligned. So for example, if I'm clicking on it, I can go back to the rule viewer that I showed you before. Now it's going to show me across the entire network how many rules are violating my corporate matrix. And if I want to get into my Palo Alto rules that violate that, I'm just going to go to the device picker of Tufin. And let's say for this demo, I want to focus on a few rules that I have from my Prisma Access that actually violate my unified security policy. Of course, we do it for each one of the DGs. We get it from each one of the Palo Alto policies that we have. Once I'm applying this search, it's going to show me 2 rules that they have violation to my corporate matrix. The first rule that we have here, which is permit ICMP, we can see that we have critical violation. If I'm opening it, you'll be able to see all the information we're getting from Panorama. For example, the source, the destination, the service, application IDs, URL categories, source IDs, and etc. And here we can see some more information that we're adding. Our information here shows me that this rule has critical violations. When I'm clicking on it, it shows me exactly why. So this is the rule that I selected, rule number 1, that I showed you before, this permit ICMP. And this one has 52 different violations. And let's see why. The first violation says that the source of the rule comes from the Amsterdam Site B zone, and the destination goes to the virtual data center that I have. According to my USP, I should allow only these services in the traffic between them. But in my case, I'm allowing application default. That's why Tufin, in that case, is showing me the gap between the desired security state to what's configured right now in my policy. And like I showed you before for change automation, for the unused rules, we can do the same here. I can now start a process to modify this rule based on the recommendations from Tufin, change the source destination service, or I can remove it if I want, disable the rule or remove it from my policies. Of course, I can always create reports for that will be sent that shows my team how many violations we have for PCI, how many violations we have for NERC, and etc. And last thing that I wanted to talk with you about it here is that many times we also see organizations that they're getting a lot of violations from Tufin, for example, for PCI, for NERC, but this is something that they're working on. This is something that they got an exception for. So in order not, to avoid Tufin spamming you with many alerts on rules that are not according to your desired security state, you can always create USB exceptions. Exceptions can be for a specific rule, or it can be for traffic exception. Okay. Charles, do we have any questions so far for this part?
Nope, you're good so far.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone that has any questions, feel free to drop them in chat. Okay, so after I talked about the unified security policy and how we can leverage our rule viewer of Tufin to find this useful information, I want to move to the next feature. I think one of the main functionalities we have in Tufin. This one called our topology map. We call it our global connectivity map, actually. So this global connectivity map that I'm going to show you is actually an interactive topology that is automatically built by Tufin. What we do and what you see in front of you is that we can see all the different devices and platforms that I'm monitoring right now in my lab. When we started 20 years ago, like Tim said, we were focused mostly on the on-prem side. we started from showing how each one of the firewalls connected to the routers and etc. We still do it today, of course. But in addition to that, we also added today the option to see exactly what's happening also in your cloud. Each one of your firewalls that you have that sits on the cloud, what's the connection between them? If it's for east-south, north-west, east-west, north-south, each one of them is something that we can simulate based on our topology map. We also added, like I showed you before from the rule viewer of Tufin, we also added the option to track what's happening in your Prisma access in the SASE world. And of course, this was a big thing for our customers. They want to know how their SASE also communicates with their entire network. This topology map that you see in front of you is something that our largest customers are using. We have some huge telecommunication customers that what they're using this topology for is they're managing more than 15,000 devices and over 450 million routes, and they're relying on this visibility for two different use cases. First of all, we're talking about network troubleshooting. When you want to check, for example, if there is any access between source, a specific source, to a specific destination for some service, we can simulate that by using this path analysis. So one of the queries that I want to show you, let's start from a simple one. Let's take this Palo Alto URL category. I want to check when I'm using this path analysis. Of course, I can use IPs, but not only that. I can use also next generation features here. If it's FQDN, application IDs, URL categories, and etc. When I'm doing it, I just added to the destination a specific URL category that I have, and I want to check if I can access with HTTPS for that. Once I'm clicking on Find Path, Tufin, based on all the networking data that we have, and based on all the policies we collected, we can see exactly how the path looks like end-to-end. For example, this Palo Alto firewall that I have here in San Francisco, we can see by reading this green mark that this device is actually allowing the access that we're looking for. And if I'm going to right-click on it and go to Show Matching Rules, this is going to show me the exact rule from my policies that is allowing the access that I was looking for. But we all understand that it's not always that easy. We have many use cases where we're trying to do this network troubleshooting, and we're seeing exactly where it's blocked. And we know that without Tufin, it's not easy to understand which specific device, which specific policy is blocking the access I'm looking for. So for example, I know I mentioned north-south. If I'm taking one example that I have, this one, for example, is the east-west traffic that I have. I also have your north-south traffic here. So this one, for example, mentions like a east-west traffic between two spokes with transit gateway. I have here hub and spoke topology with one gateway load balancer. Once I'm loading this query and clicking on Find Path, Tufin, by our knowledge of your cloud side and also your on-prem, we know exactly to show you how the path looks like. In this east-west, you can see that we have this hub and spoke topology. We're starting from this AWS VPC that I have, going to this Tokyo Transit Gateway. And from one of my gateway load balancers, I can see that I have one Palo Alto firewall that sits on AWS that actually is blocking the access I'm looking for. If I'm going to right-click on it and go to Show Matching Rules, it's going to show me exactly the rule that is blocking the access I'm looking for. And you can see here that in that case, I have one rule that is partially allowing the access. That's why Tufin is showing me that, but it's not allowing the entire access I'm looking for because I looked for any, and this one shows me that it's just allowing it for a few services. So the two use cases we have here is one is that Tufin can help me with getting this network troubleshooting capabilities. And also, once we get into secure change, I will show you that. I will show you how Tufin can leverage it to help you automate your network change process. When someone submits a request from your ITSM or from Tufin, we can show you where is the gap, which devices are blocking the access, like this Palo Alto, and we can suggest and make changes on the relevant policies in order to open the access. Of course, based on the approval process, and I will show you that once we get into secure change. Okay, so one last thing that I want to show you here, and I know I mentioned Prisma Access, just to give you an example of one of the queries that related to Prisma Access. I want to do it little bit different. I know that I showed you how you can do it from the topology map directly. You can just type your source, destination, service, and etc. When I showed you before the rule viewer of Tufin, I showed you that you can use the new AI search capabilities, so the life of our customers can be easier.